The hospital director of emergency medicine had planned it as a lesson. He left 5 critical trauma patients under the sole care of the quietest nurse on his staff, laughed in front of the board members he was trying to impress, and walked away. By the time the blizzard cleared and the ore lights came back on, 6 people were alive who had no business being so, and the most powerful man in the building was no longer in it. Welcome to Steady Badges Stories. If you believe that quiet is not the same as weak, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're listening from tonight. I'm glad you're here. This one stays with you. Dr. Gordon Pace was 51 years old and had run the emergency department at St. Clement's Regional Hospital in Sudbury, Ontario for 9 years. He wore his authority the way some men wore cologne, in a quantity that announced itself before he arrived in the room. He had opinions about everything: scheduling, procurement, which interns showed promise, and particularly which members of the nursing staff had opinions of their own. Miriam Strand had opinions of her own. She was 37 and she had been at St. Clement's for 2 years on mostly night shifts. 5'4" in trauma boots, dark hair kept close pinned, brown eyes that stayed level when people talked over her. Her scrubs were regulation blue but washed soft from use. Her badge said RN, nothing below that. For 8 months she had been pushing, quietly, for a revised triage intake protocol. 12 pages, clean citations, 3 comparable Ontario hospitals that had reduced critical wait times by doing what she was asking for. She had submitted it to Pace's office. It came back unmarked both times. The second time, his assistant told her he'd said, and this was quoted directly, that he didn't take protocol redesigns from floor nurses. On the night of February 14th, 2 hospital board members were doing a site visit. The blizzard off Georgian Bay had been building since noon. By 9 o'clock, it was hammering the north side of the building hard enough to shake the windows in the trauma bays. The roads were bad. Everyone knew the roads were bad. Which was why no one was surprised when the radio crackled with a pileup on Highway 17 6 kilometers east of the city. A transport truck, 2 passenger vehicles, a minivan, multiple casualties, ETA 8 minutes. What surprised people was what Pace did next. The trauma surgeons were caught in the elevator. A pressure fault in the electrical system, strained by the storm, had locked the lift between the 2nd and 3rd floors. Maintenance was working on it. 7 minutes, maybe 10. Pace stood at the center of the ER with the 2 board members watching, and looked toward the charge desk. Miriam Strand was behind it, reviewing charts. "Nurse Strand," Pace said, loud enough to carry across the department. "Since you've been so vocal about how triage should be managed, this seems like the right moment. You take them." The room went quiet. Dr. Felix Obi, the second-year resident on shift, looked up from a supply cart. He was 29 and careful with his words, and he had enough instinct to read what was happening. "Dr. Pace." "She wants a committee seat," Pace said, not looking at him. He turned toward the board members with the easy smile of a man who thought he was making a point. Let her demonstrate competence, accountability in action. Miriam didn't move for a moment. Her eyes stayed on the chart she was holding. Danny Howell, the other floor nurse on shift, watched her. So did the paramedic standing at the intake bay. So did everyone who happened to be in the department that night and would carry the memory of it for the rest of their careers. Then she set the chart down. "All right," she said. Her voice was quiet. It was always quiet, but something in it had changed. Felix couldn't name it exactly. It was the absence of asking. The ambulance bay doors opened at 21:17. 5 stretchers came through fast, and fast meant bad, and Miriam already knew that. She walked to the center of the intake bay and stood still while the noise closed around her. Families pressing at the outer doors, monitors triggering, someone's phone ringing, the storm throwing itself against the glass. She looked at each patient. 4 seconds each, the kind of assessment that doesn't look like anything from the outside but is everything on the inside. Bay 1, the 19-year-old female. Bay 2, the boy. Bay 3, the pregnant woman. Bay 4, the elderly male with chest involvement. Bay 5, the truck driver. Nobody moved. "Now," she said. They moved. Paramedic Nasser Singh caught her eye as he pushed the first stretcher through. She coded once in transit. "We got her back. Femoral involvement, possibly junctional. Age? 19. Name? Sasha Novak." Miriam snapped on gloves and moved into Bay 1 without breaking stride. Sasha's blood pressure was falling and the dressing on her thigh had failed in transit. The blood loss was visible and fast. A nursing student in the bay doorway had gone pale and wasn't moving. "Step back or step in," Miriam said without raising her voice. "Pick one." The student stepped back. "Felix, with me." He came to his credit, he came quickly. The bleed was high and the angle was wrong for the compression points taught in schools. Miriam pressed her weight in a way that made Felix blink. Not over the wound itself, but proximal and deep, redirecting pressure through tissue. The monitor stopped dropping. How did you? Watch, she repositioned his hands to match hers. Hold, don't drift. Sasha's pressure started climbing back. Pace appeared at the bay entrance, arms crossed. Nurse Strand, she needs vascular surgery. Vascular surgery is in the elevator, Miriam said. She did not look up. I'm buying her time until they're not. You're working outside your scope. Then get someone inside their scope down here before she runs out of blood to keep. Nobody moved to get anyone, because there was no one to get. Danny appeared at Miriam's shoulder. Pressure is improving. Blood warmed, she's already cold. Miriam looked at Felix. You've got this, don't let go, don't look away, and call me if the number goes below 70. Not at 70, before. Felix straightened. Yes. She was already gone. Bay 2 held the boy. Tyler Ash was 9 years old, in the back seat of one of the passenger vehicles, and he hadn't been crying since he arrived. That was the thing about children in trauma. The ones who cried were usually going to be all right. The ones who went quiet were the ones that scared you. Tyler was quiet. His intake vitals had looked bad but not collapsing, and the intern who'd done the initial pass had moved on. Miriam checked his abdomen first, then his pupils. Then she put her hand on his forearm and felt the quality of his pulse, with the kind of attention that didn't show on her face. Rob, she said to the ER tech near the supply cart, second IV and a dry warming blanket. The one he arrived in is wet. She stayed beside Tyler long enough to look at him directly. He blinked at her, slow, not quite tracking. I'm Miriam, she said. Her voice was different here. Still calm, but softer. I'm going to take care of you. You don't have to talk. Just stay with me, okay? His eyelids moved, not a nod, but something. She left Rob monitoring him and moved to Bay 3. The pregnant woman's name was Bridget Osey. 28 years old, 32 weeks along. The seatbelt bruise crossing her abdomen made Miriam's jaw tighten when she saw it. Bridget was awake and frightened and kept asking about the baby. I'm checking right now, Miriam said. Tell me where the pain is. Bridget told her. Miriam called for the portable ultrasound before anyone offered it. It arrived with 11% battery. She angled the probe, found what she was looking for in under 40 seconds, and turned the screen so Bridget could see it. Your baby has a heartbeat, she said. Right there, you see it? Bridget made a sound that wasn't quite words. Keep looking at it, Miriam said. That's what we're protecting tonight. The lights went out. Not a flicker, out. The emergency generators came on in strips. Bay 1 lit, Bay 2 went dim, Bay 3 stayed dark. Someone down the corridor shouted something that was swallowed by the blizzard. Monitors rebooted in a different sequence. An alarm started in a different key. Bridget screamed. I'm here, Miriam said. She had not moved. Same position, hand on Bridget's arm, voice level. The power is restoring. Nothing has changed for you or the baby. Danny arrived with a flashlight and 2 glow sticks, like she'd been thinking ahead. She cracked both and hung one at the bay entrance without being asked. Pace appeared at the curtain. In the half-dark, he looked less composed than an hour ago. She needs to be transferred. Miriam looked through the bay opening at the ambulance bay windows. The snow was coming sideways and the drifts against the glass were already halfway up. In that, she said, no vehicle gets safely out of this lot for another hour at minimum. She stays. I'm making that call. You made your call when you walked away. She turned back to Bridget. Danny, stay with her, vitals every 90 seconds. Anything changes on fetal monitoring, you get me. She was in Bay 4 before he finished his sentence. The patient there was Lou Marchetti, 74 years old, retired machinist from Espanola, with the particular stillness of a man who had seen enough in his life that a hospital bay in a February blizzard did not rank among his most frightening rooms. His x-rays was up on the light board, 2 fractured ribs, the worrying shadow of a pneumothorax developing. He was monitoring, but narrowing. Miriam assessed him efficiently, repositioned his oxygen delivery, checked breath sounds on the left side, made notes in handwriting so clean and fast it didn't look like it belonged to someone working under pressure. You've done this before, Lou said. She didn't answer. Not nursing. I mean the way you moved through those other bays before you came in here, you triaged us. He watched her hands. My daughter-in-law's a nurse. She doesn't move the way you move. That's what triage means, Miriam said. Not like that. His voice was hoarse but certain. My nephew did 4 years forces. He told me you can always tell. He said they walk into a room and look before they move, every time, even when there's nothing there. Lou paused. Sartek? The bay went still. Felix, appearing at the doorway with an update on Sasha, stopped. Miriam made one final note in the chart. Her hand did not hesitate, but the line of her shoulders shifted, barely, the way something shifts when it has been touched in the right place. Mr. Marchetti, she said quietly, how is the breathing? Well enough to notice you didn't answer, he almost smiled. I was Air Force 30 years back, baseboardin'. Pace had followed her, he'd heard it. The board members, hovering at a careful distance in the corridor, had heard it too. Nurse Strand, Pace said, a word. After this assessment. Now. She turned and looked at him. Her green eyes were steady and not soft. Mr. Marchetti may be developing tension pneumo. I'll be back in 3 minutes. She looked at Felix. You stay with him. In the corridor, Pace dropped his voice. What did he mean? He's a patient who's talking, Miriam said. It means his airway is open. Don't be clever. I'm working, she said. That's all that's happening. She went to Bay 5. The truck driver, Hank Colville, was 61, trapped in his cab for 20 minutes before fire services cut him free. His legs were swollen and firm to the touch. His urine output was almost nothing. His blood panel was posting now, and the numbers were heading somewhere they shouldn't. Crush syndrome. Late recognition. The window was smaller than it should have been. Miriam ordered fluids with specific parameters, called for repeat labs, and wrote the monitoring instructions in a format that looked less like nursing notes and more like a field assessment. She walked the resident assigned to Hank through exactly what to watch and what to call her for, and she did it without impatience, though she had every reason for it. Then the radio at the charge desk crackled. A second call from the same highway, a vehicle gone off the embankment into a ditch, spotted by a passing snowplow, one patient critical, ETA 6 minutes. Miriam was back at the board, writing names when Pace's voice came from behind her. That is not your board. It is tonight, she said. She kept writing. I am the chief of this department. She turned. The ER had gathered. Not conspicuously, no one had called them. But nurses and residents and a respiratory therapist who had finally gotten the stairwell door open, 2 security guards, the paramedics from the first run who hadn't quite managed to leave. They stood in the corridor and the bay openings and watched. You assigned them to me, Miriam said. At 9:17. In front of the board members and the camera above the charge desk, she looked at him without anger and without warmth. You assigned them to me as a lesson. Pace's voice sharpened. You have misrepresented your credentials. I haven't said a word about my credentials. The old man in Bay 4 asked a question. I didn't answer it. Something moved behind his eyes. He looked at the people watching. He looked at the camera. He found a different angle. This hospital cannot allow a nurse to operate without proper oversight. Then provide it, Felix said. Everyone looked at him. He looked briefly surprised that he'd spoken and then kept going. Every decision she has made tonight I have observed. Everyone was correct. I'm providing oversight, Dr. Pace. So is Danny. So is Rob. He swallowed once. We are all here. A beat of silence. The blizzard pushed against the building. Pace opened his mouth. The ambulance bay doors opened again. The 6th patient came in on a stretcher. A woman in her mid-50s from the ditch, head injury, altered and deteriorating. Nasser and 2 fire services personnel still in their gear. Miriam was at the stretcher before it stopped moving. The ER followed her without being asked. At 22:41, 2 figures came through the main entrance in Canadian Forces dress uniforms under dark coats. Behind them came a woman in a Health Canada identification jacket, with a sealed folder under one arm and the expression of someone who already knew what she was going to find. The taller officer had silver at his temples and the kind of posture that rooms reorganize around. The younger officer walked like a man who had been looking for something and hated how long it had taken. Pace moved to intercept. This area is restricted. The colonel walked past him. His eyes found Miriam at the charge desk. She was updating the board, back half-turned. Raven, he said. The marker stopped. Felix looked at Danny. Danny looked at Rob. Pace blinked. What? The younger officer answered without looking at him. Master Corporal Miriam Strand, Canadian Forces. 424 Transport and Rescue Squadron, CFB Trenton. Search and Rescue Technician. Call sign Raven. The department didn't gasp, it stopped. Pace actually laughed. It was a short, wrong sound. She's a registered nurse. Yes, said the woman in the Health Canada jacket, holding up her identification. Leela Garreau, Office of the Inspector General. And she is also the former senior SAR-Tech with 424 Squadron. 4 Arctic deployments. 2 mass casualty responses, years operational rescue. Commendation for bravery, 2019. Classified extractions redacted by order of command. Nobody moved. Lou Marchetti's voice came from Bay 4. I knew it. A few people almost smiled, not quite, but almost. Pace recovered the way men like him always tried to. He turned to the board members. Whatever her background, she performed procedures without hospital authorization. I maintained command oversight throughout the entire event. You left, Felix said. At 9:22, I have it timestamped. He held up his notepad. He had been keeping notes since the patients arrived. Decisions, timing, who made what call, in the handwriting of someone who had decided that someone should. I thought there should be a record, he said, so I made one. The board members looked at the security camera above the charge desk. Then they looked at Lila Garreau. She was looking at Pace. Colonel Yves Fontaine came to stand beside Miriam while the room reorganized itself around the new gravity. He was quiet for a moment. You should have called us, he said. I wasn't hiding, she said. I was resting. From what? She didn't answer. He didn't push. The anonymous safety reports, he said after a moment. 4 of them filed over 10 months, all written in language that reads like SAR after-action documentation. He looked at her steadily. Someone's been watching this department for a long time. Someone, she said. He nodded once. Garreau opened her folder and addressed the board members in the tone of someone delivering information they had asked for and would not enjoy. St. Clement's Regional has recorded 4 preventable deaths in 10 months. Elderly patients, high-acuity cases, all involving delayed triage linked to decisions made from this administrative office. She held up 12 pages, clean-printed and annotated. There is also a triage reform proposal submitted twice to the department chief and returned without review, this one. Pace's voice went thin. I was not notified of any investigation. You weren't entitled to notification, Garreau said, given that you are the subject of it. In Bay 2, Tyler Ash had been slowly improving, warming protocol holding, pressure steadied, Rob checking him every few minutes with the diligence of someone who had been told exactly what to watch. Which was why Rob noticed when it changed. Miriam, his voice came fast, pressures dropping, pupils unequal. She was in the bay before the sentence finished. Tyler's monitor showed what she had feared from the moment she first took his pulse. A pattern that looked like stability but was a delayed intracranial bleed waiting for its moment. She had flagged it in her notes. The intern who assessed him on arrival hadn't known to look. Neurosurgery, she said. Not a page, a phone call. I'll talk to them. The east stairwell opened 20 minutes ago, Felix said, already moving. She leaned close to Tyler. For a half-second, the bay blurred. Not because her vision failed, because another face came through it. A boy, years back, younger than Tyler, in the wreckage of a snowmobile on a frozen lake in the Northwest Territories. She had reached him in time. She had pulled him out, and it had mattered. 3 months later, she had not reached her teammate Jamie in time on a different mountain in a different storm, and nothing had felt the same since. That was why she had come to St. Clement's. That was why she had taken night shifts and kept her eyes down and let people like Pace call her quiet. She blinked. Tyler blinked back at her. Stay, she said. She ran the bay the way she had run crash sites in the dark, controlled without wasted movement. Felix got the neurosurgeon on the line and she gave the clinical picture in 40 seconds flat. Presentation, timeline, findings, what she needed. The neurosurgeon said, bring him up. They carried Tyler through the east stairwell with Felix managing the IV line and Rob on the monitoring lead and Miriam at the head of the stretcher calling the rhythm of each step. The corridor smelled like wet concrete and generator exhaust, and she didn't register any of it. The neurosurgical team was waiting at the 3rd floor. She handed Tyler over and stood outside the OR doors with her hands empty. That was always the worst part. The moment after the rescue when the door closed and skill turned into waiting. Colonel Fontaine stood beside her. He did not say anything about Jamie. He had read the report from that rescue. He had read everything. The board review, he said quietly. It was triggered by an anonymous safety complaint. 4 complaints, actually. The language matches SAR after action format. He paused. Your service record will show a different level of commendation than you let this hospital believe. I didn't lie, she said. No, he said. You just left most of it out. She watched the OR door. I was tired, Eve. I know. Tired is not broken. I know that too. At 4:17 a.m., the neurosurgeon called down. He's out. We got the bleed, critical but stable. A pause. Whoever caught the presentation when they did. If you'd been 40 minutes later, we'd be having a different conversation. Miriam set down the phone. Danny put a Tim Hortons coffee in front of her without a word. Someone had brought a bag in from the paramedic unit, and Danny had held one aside. She set it down and didn't say anything, which was the right thing. Miriam held it for a moment and looked at the board. 6 names, all alive. By midnight, Pace had been escorted from the administrative wing by federal compliance officers and a hospital counsel who had stopped returning his calls. The board members had requested a full independent clinical review. Garreau's team was in the conference room with 10 months of incident reports, working through them with the focused efficiency of people who already knew what they were going to find. Felix did not go home after his shift ended. He sat in the break room and rewrote his notes properly, dated and signed and formatted for submission to hospital administration. He said later it was the most useful thing he had ever done with a notepad. He submitted them at 5:45 a.m. and then finally went home. Miriam gave her formal statement that afternoon. She said her full name. She said what she had done and where she had learned to do it. She did not apologize for the quiet years at St. Clement's. And when the investigator asked if she regretted stepping in the night before, she answered before fear could finish forming the alternative. No, she said. A month later, 4 new operational standards went up above the charge desk. No patient is seen by no one. No safety concern is filed without formal response. No administrator overrides a clinical triage decision. And the 4th, added by the new interim chief, a woman transferred from Hamilton who ran the department, like someone who intended to do it correctly, read, "Every nurse in this department is the most important person in the building." Lou Marchetti sent a card, handwritten because he said cards should be handwritten if they were going to mean anything. It said, "I told my nephew I met a SAR-tech. He didn't believe me. I said she was the quietest one in the room. He said that tracks." 6 weeks after the blizzard, Tyler Ash came back to visit. He walked with a slight lisp to the right, and wore a jacket 2 sizes too large the way 9-year-olds do when someone buys for growth. His parents came with him. His mother still marked by the accident in ways you could see if you knew to look. His father carrying the particular relief of someone who nearly lost something that could not be replaced. Tyler found Miriam at the charge desk. She crouched to his level. "I remember your voice," he said. "Yeah? You told me to stay." He thought about it seriously. "I did." "You did the work," she said. "I just showed up." He considered this the way children consider things that matter to them. "Can I come back again?" "Any time," she said. His father looked at Miriam over the boy's head and didn't say anything. He didn't need to. That evening, before the shift turned, Miriam stood at the east window and watched the last of the February light go flat over the city. The blizzard was a week gone, and the sky above Sudbury was a particular shade of winter purple that she had seen before. From the open door of a cormorant helicopter at altitude, the whole north country spread beneath her, the cold so clean it cut. She had liked it better from here. She clipped her badge to her scrubs. It still said RN, nothing below that. But the department knew what it meant now, and that was enough, and it probably always should have been. She picked up the marker and turned to the board. 3 inbound. A chest pain, 2 MVAs, a possible stroke from a neighborhood north of the city where the plowing had been slow. "What do we have?" she said. Danny read the radio report. Felix leaned over the counter. Rob was already moving. And St. Clement's Regional came alive. Thank you for listening tonight. If this story reminded you of someone who showed up when it counted, drop their name in the comments. They deserve to be remembered. This is Steady Badges Stories. See you next time.